It's funny that it is this way because you wouldn't really think that it would be this way, but when you make sacrifices for the well-being of others, that's where meaning is found.
You have to take all of the responsibility, but the benefit is you get this way out.
I don't know. I don't like the idea of having to constantly defend against convinced minority positions.
There is a resistance mechanism that has not been invoked against BIP 110.
Why do you think that hasn't appeared?
It's entirely possible that BIP 110 ends up failing, ends up splitting off, but it's also entirely possible that they'll convince miners to signal
how Bitcoin's governance model works. What do the nodes do? What do the miners do? And who's in charge, you know?
I don't think Bitcoin dies. If you can clip that if you want, but I don't think that's the case.
Luke DeWolf, welcome to Market Disruptors.
Jake, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I'm excited for this chat. You've been on my radar for a while. We were doing some chatting offline just now, but you strike me as like an intelligent and intellectually honest guy, and the kind of guy that I'm grateful to have on the front lines defending Bitcoin, as your book is called. And so, yeah, I think you're a smart, good dude to have, and I'm happy to have you, grateful to have you doing this. I think first, just for our audience who maybe is new to you and what you're doing in the Bitcoin space, if you could walk me through, maybe before you entered into Bitcoin, you were working as a cybersecurity professional, what you took away from that into the Bitcoin space and what you're focused on now.
Sure. Well, hey, thanks for the intro. I appreciate it, and I'm flattered. Let's see if I live up to that. But I mean, yeah, I've tried to stay in my lane a little bit in the Bitcoin space, and only just recently started to get a little more out there with bringing some of my past experience into things. And well, we were talking offline, as you say. I'll weave this in, but I have a little interesting connection to Robert Breedlove and Jordan Peterson and things like this. So some figures that are maybe a little lightning rod-ish in various communities. But yeah, I'll get to that. So answering your question, yeah, I started in the critical infrastructure space, working in the oil and gas sector in Canada. That's how I started my career. And about midway through, after a few years, I switched to doing cybersecurity in that space. And I mean, this is the stuff that controls oil and gas pipelines, also a bunch of other types of control systems in the oil and gas sector, gas wells, things like this. So I got to know quite a bit about how this stuff works in the real world, and how stuff is different when it's touching the physical world as opposed to when it's just dealing with computers, something like this. You can have real physical consequences if something is, say, controlling the amount of gas that's going through a pipe. You overpressure that, and that can get pretty explosive pretty quickly. So yeah, there's real consequences to this stuff is basically the takeaway there. But there's a more meta thread that critical infrastructure is the type of thing that we depend on for every aspect of our society. That's things like making sure that the water is running when you turn on the tap, electricity is flowing when you turn on the light, and heat, all this other stuff. That there's food in grocery stores. There's the ability to make payments, right? That's considered a critical infrastructure pretty much universally. So the way we think about and defend these types of systems is just different from how you defend your email or something like that. And so taking that into the Bitcoin space was something that I only just realized was a possibility. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I got into Bitcoin in the process of moving from Canada to Finland, which is another thread of my life. I'm from Alberta, the province in Canada where the oil and gas sector really has its center, its base. There's oil and gas in other parts of Canada, but Alberta is the headquarters pretty much universally. And that has a lot of challenges. That province has felt a lot of say hate from or pressure from the rest of the country, a lot of dislike that the main industry is this oil and gas, right? It's not climate friendly, all this sort of thing. Justin Trudeau was very anti-Alberta, or at least very anti-Alberta industry. So it was just tough. And I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to move. I got a job offer, and I'd wanted to live abroad, and fairly specifically in the Nordics. Norway was the other country I was considering, my wife and I. But Finland gave me the opportunity, And this was all in the middle of COVID and in the middle of, Bitcoin crypto was going on a run. So I was looking for ways to, where do I put my money? Instead of like the traditional investment funds, things like this, I have to move my money out of Canada. How do I do that? So I'm thinking about all this. And then, one day I see Robert Breedlove on the Lex Friedman show. That's one of the podcasts that I still listen to from time to time. He's not putting out that much content these days, but for a while there, it was Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Lex Friedman that I would have on almost every episode, something like this. So that gives you an idea of who was rattling around in my head a little bit at that point. But yeah, so Rob,
same for me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Good set, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Rob goes on Lex Friedman, and he's speaking my language. And there'd been a few other people on, crypto people. First of all, I can't even remember who is affiliated with this coin or that coin. And at that point, I thought that it was a good strategy to diversify, right? To hold a bunch of different coins, see which one is gonna do well, whatever. I actually was completely discounting Bitcoin at that point. I had no idea that. I thought it was just the old tech and something better must have come around. All of the usual things, right? But there was Anthony Pompliano, Nick Carter, and both of those guys were pretty much only talking about Bitcoin. To their credit, I mean, both of them sometimes get branded as being shitcoiners or whatever, but yeah, they were talking only about Bitcoin, and I mean that was interesting. But Rob was speaking my language. He invoked Dr. Peterson, Jordan Peterson, multiple times, and that just got my attention. That the whole intellectual dark web, if you want to call it that subculture, that was very taboo at the time, and at least in my circles, like it wasn't good to be saying that you were a fan of those folks and influenced by their ideas and whatnot, political correctness. And yeah, so I just resonated, and I knew I had to go learn more. Sailor series, and I mean that's it. that got me. I must have watched that 3 or 4 times in succession, and I mean that says a lot about there's maybe even a certain era of Bitcoiner where listening to discussions about money, a monetary theory, sort of boring if you haven't thought about it, but I was just fascinated. And I mean Sailor cites Saifedean, and then basically almost goes verbatim through a few chapters of the Bitcoin Standard in that series. And but it was just fascinating to me how you could think about money and the implications, and so that just got me, and I was down the rabbit hole. But by this point I'd moved. I wasn't full maxi yet, but it didn't take long, and then I just wanted to contribute. I wanted to find some way to contribute in the space. I found a publisher publisher translator. They at the time they were a little more translator heavy, of books into various languages, including Finnish, which was my target. I was trying to get better at the Finnish language, and I wanted to read Bitcoin stuff in that language. And so I found them. I thought, hey, they sent a post, put out a post asking for marketing help, and I sent them a message. I say I'd be doing podcasts for a few years. Nothing Bitcoin related, of course, but if you're interested to see what I was up to before Bitcoin, there's still the Northern Myths podcast out on YouTube where I talked about Norse mythology and Finnish mythology and this sort of thing for a while. So that was fun. From a Jordan Peterson type angle, that was the entire point of that thing.
What year was that you were doing that?
Oh wow, 2017 to 2020. Essentially, maybe okay. We started 2018, but yeah. Not a lot of output, but early on.
When did you read Maps of Meaning too? We'll talk more about that later, or maybe soon.
Well, yeah, that was a question Rob asked me too, actually, back. So I mean, skipping ahead slightly was that I ended up doing a series on Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning with Rob on the What Is Money show, and I mean that was surreal. That was super cool that he invited me to do that, and because that was the book that he had invoked that got me down the rabbit hole and everything. So that was just really cool.
Mm.
I think it was 2016, 2017 time was when I read Maps of Meaning. I'm probably just mixing up years a little bit. It's a while ago now, but yeah, it was back when Jordan Peterson was like really in the zeitgeist a little bit, and controversial, of course. And he got on my radar, and I loved his lecture series. I consumed basically every piece of content that he put out multiple times. And
Did you listen to the Genesis series and that was, I
absolutely.
still think that's probably his greatest work that he's done is that series, but his Maps of Meaning course at University of Toronto, the 2017 one and the 2017 Personality, and what's that course called? Personality and it's something.
Yeah, exactly. No, and so it must have been like late 2017, early 2018, because those courses were out, but they were fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was just doing that Genesis series, and I agree with you. I think that's the best content he's put out. And I mean, you can think of the guy however you like, but he helped me a lot to figure out how I wanted to live my life, how I wanted to be an adult. So it really helped. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can't stand this thing that I notice on the internet where someone can be so helpful, do so much good, nail so much stuff, and they miss like a thing. They miss two things, and everyone just piles on, pounds them into the ground, and it's like, bro, like if all of your mistakes for the past 15 years were broadcasted to the internet, like it would not be hard to find. I just hate this idea of like judging people by like their biggest mistakes, or the goofiest things they've said or whatever it is. Like I could levy some criticisms at Peterson for sure, but like the net like contribution to humanity and society is like, there's, I don't know. Yeah. I think that we need to have some like respect and like respect for those who've done great things and compassion and empathy for like, nobody's perfect. Even in this, we're going to get into the BIP 110 conversation and all this stuff. And I even feel this way about like, some people, they have one, whether you agree or disagree with it is not even my point, but like, someone will take a stance on the other side and it's like, you are like totally an evil person now, and it's like, we can't, I think that's one thing we need to defend against, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, not to jump around too much, but I had one case where someone who I liked their content on X. I didn't know them personally. They were, I think, semi-nim or something like this, but unfollowed me because I didn't have one same opinion, and we agreed on virtually everything else. And it's just like, come on, like you're gonna be like that? Like really? Why? You unfollow someone or you block someone or whatever just because you disagree about one thing. I've got tons of people in the Bitcoin space that I follow who follow me that I don't agree with, that are on opposite sides of the big issue, the BIP 110 thing. And it's like, come on, we can talk, we can get along, but we can get into that a little more later. But yeah, I just agree with you on that point.
Yeah. I'm gonna skip ahead from what I told you before. Let's just dive right into the Jordan Peterson stuff while we're on it. You you did this series. I remember I listened to chunks of it back in the day. My producer was talking to me before, and he kind of reminded me of some of that stuff, and I was like, "That's right, we got to dive into some of that."
Awesome.
You said in that series, I think that Maps of Meaning led you to Bitcoin. And how most people find Bitcoin through price action or like a personal or like like a financial crisis or something. There's like a catalyst that pulls them in. But you came into it through this philosophical frame, and I wonder if that obviously you have this cybersecurity background, but you were coming in through that philosophical lens, and I wonder how that changes your approach. Like the elements of like truth and honesty and all of that sort of stuff, how that contributed to your understanding of Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, the whole thing with it was I had really had a focus in my life in figuring out what to do with myself, meaning for lack of a better term. And the way Bitcoin fit into that was just this thing that seems to be the solution to so many of the world's problems in an elegant way. I mean, many of the sort of monetary things that we all talk about in inflation, I just had no idea why that had to exist for a really long time, and and then understanding that it's only caused by people taking what they can, essentially, if you give them power and you give them control over money, over the money supply. I just hadn't thought about it before, and so it was almost as if something was priming me for that, right? That that understanding. And I mean, I'm not sure if my approach was any different. I think specifically it was that maps of meeting Jordan Peterson, all this, and Rob just talking openly about that. If I'm remembering correctly, I think my point was something like that people should, uh, and I mean that's a strong word, but it's nice if people talk about their influences and their backgrounds, and you have a diversity of thought, because that pulls people in from different places, and where where I've gone in my Bitcoin journey, and where I've gotten the most out of it is just trying to grow adoption, right? And
Mm.
telling people really, really simply that I think this is worthwhile. It's not about the number go up, even though it's always nice when number go up. It's it's about taking this freedom, this sovereignty, not letting anyone else control you anymore. I think big part of my journey, and this is maybe going to sound a little funny, is that I kind of I thought myself out of religion or organized religion through my explorations of Jordan Peterson's material. Well, so I did this podcast, this Northern Myths podcast, and it was basically structurally based on that Genesis series that Jordan
Mm.
Peterson did, right? Same idea anyway. It was
That's
read the
that's interesting because the opposite happened to me. Well, not the opposite exactly, but that going through that series made me go, you know what? I should like re-engage with organized religion more than I have. So that's interesting. I want to keep hearing why that happened for you.
No, yours is probably more common, and I understand and respect why. But I think I really just I did a number on myself in good and bad ways, in terms of just really looking behind the curtain a little bit much. It felt like every little bit of religious story, or even story in general, was something that had this formula, these lessons. And it's not to take anything away. And in fact, for me, it was more about that the structure of story, kind of myth or narrative, boils down to the parts that survive over generations, right? You might not remember the exact name of the guy who was the hero that one time, but you remember that he was the hero. You might not remember the tiny minutia until writing came around. You might not remember the tiny minutia of exactly what he did, but you remember the broad strokes, right, over time. And it's the
The
things that
pattern
are
of behavior
yes,
sticks.
and it's
Yeah.
the things that are useful. That's exactly right. It's the things that are useful to remember. They got remembered back when there was only this oral tradition stuff. Writing changed all of that, and that's I think a big part of what Dr. Peterson latches onto, in terms of that Judeo-Christian tradition had a major shift in terms of that it was able to record this stuff a lot differently. Of course, there was writing in many other cultures, but that was actually part of what kind of brought me in other directions, was that I wanted to explore, okay, do other cultures do things the same way, similarly? Can we find similar lessons? And I think through that process, I kind of just landed on that I'm really happy to just now live my life for a while and not think about these kind of cosmic questions. I've given
Mm.
myself a better moral compass than I had. Uh, One of his sayings is something like, aim for the highest good that you can conceive of. And the corollary to that is that sin, translating as missing the mark, is really just that. You miss the mark of what you're aiming for.
Mm.
And taking out the sort of evangelical Christian, because that's my background originally, the evangelical Christian sort of shame of that if you sin, you're bad, you're going to hell, whatever. Reframing that into, well, you just didn't do as well as you could have, and maybe you want to aim for better. That whole reframing, reflipping, completely changed how I thought about life in general in a positive way.
If you hold Bitcoin, I want you to think about something just for a second. Not how you store it, but who gets it when you're gone. Most self-custody Bitcoiners have never tested if their family could access it if they were gone. Knowing where the keys are isn't the same as knowing how to use them. That's the technical side. But what they most often miss is the legal side. So even if your family found the keys and they knew how to use them, there's no legal structure telling them the Bitcoin is theirs or how it's supposed to pass to them. You see, Bitcoin that isn't properly retitled and documented could end up in probate. So it's not one problem, it's two. Yes, can your family physically access it, but is there a legal framework that says it's theirs? So if you want to find out, take a short 2-minute quiz and get your inheritance ready to score. Just go to unchained.com/Mark Moss. Again, that's unchained.com/Mark Moss. And it's definitely worth 2 minutes to find out that it's actually handled or not.
How do you conceptualize the highest good that you can aim at? Like, what is that to you? It's a difficult question, right? But
well, I'm going to invoke a little bit of it depends on what you mean by highest good or something like this. That's half of a troll. No, like
I got you.
It depends on which level of abstraction you're thinking of. I'm being semi-serious. Like in a lot of ways, to me, it doesn't make sense to constantly be thinking about that. Like that's maybe how I would conceptualize this right now, is that it's not good to be rethinking your aim too often. You can sort of put yourself on a bit of an autopilot towards a big overarching goal. And when you get confronted with things that get in the way of that goal, this is sort of part of this is straight out of Maps and Meaning type stuff. And I do recommend listening to the lectures are the best, but if you want to hear it from me or from the Bitcoin perspective, the series with Rob, it was a lot of fun. But when you get things that are in the way of your goal, you have to reevaluate. You have to either figure out your way around your problem, or you have to reframe your reality, your map of the territory. And so you take that aim, right, this map of the world that you have, and try to find how to get there as efficiently as possible. Figuring out what the aim is I think the hard part that people, me, have a hard time with. But I think I landed on something like trying to do the best for the world, but also centered on my family, my local community, and how can I advocate for the things that I believe will do the most good in the world without sacrificing the good for my local circle, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I realize, as I ask the question, when I think of it, it's like, to me, I think some would say that could be like a definition for God, I guess, right? Like the highest thing that you can aim at. Like by definition, God is like the good of goods, in the Christian lens, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, like the Spirit of spirits, like the ultimate thing. But then also too, it's in a human lens. There's in every wisdom tradition, religious tradition, there's a recognition of the ineffability of that thing. Like the first line of the Tao Te Ching, excuse my pronunciation, any Mandarin speakers out there, but is the Tao that can be known is not the eternal Tao. So the way that can be understood is not the eternal way. And so, in the Christian lens, it's like there's this recognition of God exists out of time, outside of human understanding, essentially. And so there's this way where whether it's in the Christian lens or not, you fix yourself at the ultimate good while understanding that you do not understand it. I think is like a helpful, because there's a humility in that I find. It's like, okay, that's what I'm aiming at, but at the same time, I recognize that like all that I know is not, what I know is not all that I need to know. I don't understand what this thing is, even though I make a conscious decision to pursue it. I know that I don't know it in a total sense. You can touch it, it can the spirit can graze against your consciousness, so to speak, but you don't like, whether it's the Tao or the Christian God as we understand are these things. I think there's you should have a decision to aim at it. What's funny is you don't know what it is, but you know when you're missing it. That's kind of funny. You don't know what the good is, but you know when you've sinned. You know when you've stepped off the path. So there is this, I don't know. It can be known and will not be known at the same time, but I think it's worth pursuing still, which it seems you have, whether what we put in the place of that ultimate goal, you're saying that, that there is, it's meaningful to pursue that thing still.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. And I mean, just for my part, I think reevaluating the really highest level of that too often takes a lot of effort that can just be spent doing the things. And I've been just doing the things for a while, and that's got its own fulfillment, right? Like just accomplishing stuff that has some kind of step along the way towards that upper goal. And I think I spent a little bit too long in my, say, early teenage years, early 20s, evaluating that top level goal too much, and then realizing that maybe
you weren't doing anything. You were just thinking about that,
Well, no, this is a good tie-in actually. That if you're stuck, just listen to the wisdom of the stories. That might sound funny, but just go with the examples of these great characters. And Dr. Peterson of course tells the Genesis story, but he also tells the Christ story quite often, and what that means, what that represents. Take sacrifice onto yourself for the good of those around you. I mean, that's probably really blasphemous to some people to boil it down that much.
No. I think that's what it means to be Christ-like. You emulate the spirit of the good, and that is like the way made flesh, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so you'll find it's funny that it is this way, because you wouldn't really think that it would be this way. But when you make sacrifices of yourself for the well-being of others, that's where meaning is found. That's where, like, and there's like a psychological positive emotion, that's correlated with that. But that's where your life becomes meaningful. And if you want your life to be meaningless, you should think about yourself all the time and like only do things, like sacrifice other people's well-being for yourself. And then if you do that, you'll be like, oh, I hate my life and nobody likes me. And, it's like, it's funny that it's that way, but that's just how it works, it seems.
Yeah. And I mean, taking that a little more concrete, it's like if you do things for other people, if they're good people, they'll give it back to you. There's a little bit of karma in there, like what you put out into the universe is what you get back. There's so many of these ideas that echo across traditions, and I mean, on the sacrifice point, I think it's really important that it's not for nothing. That's really important. Like I think there are a lot of things these days that are about extending empathy way too far in the world in ways that are like, hey, I'm just going to make life worse for myself and the people around me, just for this incremental little bit of hypothetical good that it could do across the world or something like this. And I don't
or like a twisted understanding of what good actually is, or something like that.
Yeah. And so I think where I've landed is that my moral compass is about making sure that the people around me are in a good place, and that my local community, my country, where I live, much more importantly than where I'm from, that those things are in a good shape, trending in the right direction, and then just accepting what you can and can't have control over, right? I mean, this has a tie into responsibility, right? I think one of Jordan Peterson's primary messages was just take responsibility. Only you can take responsibility for your life and make it better. Other people aren't going to do it for you, and if they do it for you, that's not actually going to have the result you're looking for. And Bitcoin is the same thing. And that was probably the part that resonated with me was that this is something where you have to take all of the responsibility, but the benefit is you get this way out, right, of this rat race of what everyone is chasing. And Jordan Peterson is basically saying the same thing. Like you have a way out. You don't have to be chasing all of this consumerist stuff. The blaming other people for your problems, things like this. That's not getting you anywhere. Just take responsibility for you, and it's not that everything else sorts itself out. That's not true. But what becomes clear is what's important, and so that all that other stuff just goes away, fades into the background, and you can focus on you and those around you, and that's what I like.
Yeah. It's a good distinction, because I might have said something like sorts itself out, but it might not, right? Like it might not work out, like, but and I think that's where the faith element comes of like, you take responsibility, you do what you think is right, and then you like let things fall where they may. You recognize that you don't have control, so yeah, you take that personal responsibility, and then you act, and then you go, it's an assumption of faith, but it's like telling the truth will bring forward the best iteration of reality that I can manage. And even if that ends with you nailed to a cross, so to speak, even if telling the truth, it means like you're, that's it for you. There's that, I learned that from Solzhenitsyn as well, right? That like you should have this allegiance to the truth, and that when your society falls apart, when everybody says they're not going to make that sacrifice, And so how that relates to Bitcoin, I'm squeezing in some, or some roundabout connections here, but there's this idea in the Bitcoin space that Bitcoin is like the most honest system ever built, that it's like this decentralized source of truth that cannot be tampered with. And I don't think that's true, but it's like really close to true, like
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, it's really close to true. And so it's one of the most true things. And so like a lot of Peterson's framework is around the catastrophic, Peterson, Solzhenitsyn as well, diving into the catastrophic consequences of when everyone in your society agrees to participate in the lie, and I think that like fiat currency is a lie, right? And so there's when everybody agrees to just participate, oh yeah, you can print value out of thin air, and there's no cost associated with that and whatever. I think that when everybody, knowingly or not, right, most people don't understand the lie that they're participating in. A lot of people do and just go, that's just the way it is, there's nothing we could ever do to change it. And I think that's like an abdication of your personal responsibility. And so just I wonder if you could connect for someone that's new to this, like it's like make the case that Bitcoin is this like a more honest system, that it's like sourced in something as deep as truth, and not just like, oh, there's this type of money and that type of money and whatever, you can pick whatever one. And yeah, what's the connection there?
This interesting thread for sure. And well, I think where I go with this originally is the history a little bit. This is important, and it's maybe going to come off a little ironic in the current climate, but it's important. The history of the cypherpunk movement was really aiming at something specific. It was aiming at this freedom on the internet and using the internet to achieve freedom, sovereignty, privacy, these things that governments were increasingly taking away from their citizens. And I mean the great financial crisis, of course, was a catalyst here, right, to push Bitcoin over the edge to getting created. And so I mean the purpose of Bitcoin has always been to solve the money problem, but it's got to be understood from the lens of the cypherpunk history. Like it was released on the this cryptography mailing list, right? Like I've got a button that I think Samson Moe created his cypherpunk store. I've got a Bitcoin button that my 2-year-old likes to press, and one of the quotes on there. There's a bunch of people. There's Samson. There's Knut von Ulm saying everything there is divided by 21 million or something like that, and then there's Adam Back saying cypherpunks write code, right? And the whole thing there is that you can take you can make something concrete that is only in this ephemeral digital space, like literally the ones and zeros. You can write a program that runs on a computer that changes something in the world, and you can do that in a way that has previously been walled off somehow. Like the physical barriers have just been too great. When you had to physically write something down on a piece of paper and transmit that traditionally, right? Gold can't move, right? But the invention of electricity, the invention of being able to transmit over telephones, this sort of thing, that then this is Lynn Alden a little bit, at least she popularized this take, but that communication started to outpace money, right? Money was going slower than communication at this point, and so fiat was able to run off those communication rails, right? But gold, hard money, wasn't able to do that. It was physically constrained by its properties. And then you get the cypherpunks who are there and taking advantage of the communication mechanism and creating something that is native to the communication mechanism. And there's almost something to the immaculate conception of Bitcoin, or the immaculate seeding of Bitcoin, that, just to talk about the fairness of it, that it was never distributed in any way other than, here it is, join in if you want to, right? And there's waves of adoption to Bitcoin. There's a lot of people who got into Bitcoin because they were wanting to buy drugs on the Silk Road, right? Or at least that was one of the things you could do, and then it brought a lot of people in, you know. And but it was there was never any selling it to investors.
I feel like that helped balance out the, like, you have your like hyper technical nerd whatever, you know, that was like that initial group, cypherpunk, hyper technical nerd, and then the second group was like a bunch of like weirdo people interested in drugs, and they kind of helped like balance the ecosystem early, because you had that significant personality divide, you know. And that, I don't know, I feel like there was, looking back on the development of Bitcoin over the time, I feel like there was utility to that, you know, that polarized set of people coming into it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I mean I think the whole point with it was that something was intentionally put out into the world to solve the specific problem of electronic cash. Just to cite the white paper, but really the funny thing is that there have been some critiques of, for example, Andreas Antonopoulos, and I think others who have sort of followed in that lineage, that the monetary angle of Bitcoin is sort of not correct, or at least the monetary angle of Bitcoin is reading into something that isn't there. Bitcoin, the train of thought that I'm citing a little bit here it says Bitcoin is a technology. Bitcoin is a technology. It's a decentralized system, and it happens to be quite good at something that resembles money. But I go back to the white paper and electronic cash, right? And no central controller. It puts everything back to the individual. That's kind of the tie here, right? Is that Peterson puts the individual above all else, and says that he asserts that those cultures that put the individual foremost are the ones that survive, that do the best,
that the collective thrives even through the prioritization of like judging people at the individual level, maybe is the right way to put it. And that sounds mostly right to me, I think. Yeah, it seems to me to be that way, that when you optimize for treating people as if they're divine, sovereign individuals, and that they're in control of their behavior and they will be judged, they'll receive the consequences of them positively or negatively, that frame results in the most flourishing of the collective. Yet it seems there still needs to be a place for consideration of the collective as well. So but if I'm going to lean a direction, like I'll lean in that direction pretty hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I for sure don't go all the way to being like a pure ANCAP, like that the world is, that an ideal state of the world is that there is no one at all who has any kind of control. Like if you read Peterson and you look at kind of the cultural lens, right? Hierarchy is important and order is important, and having order in a society is important. It's just that if the levers of control are wrong, like you get a tyranny effectively. Like there's a term for a lot of the state of the world is that it's anarcho tyranny, that governments won't deliberately, if they're conspiratorially minded, they won't police a lot of low level crime. You see this in, I mean, you probably see this more directly, but like California, blue states, basically, and in Europe, it's these countries that are a little more liberal. They won't police lower level crime, especially when it's done by immigrants or those of immigrant background. And
this morning we saw like thousands of people running up on the beach in Spain.
So
they're just yeah. Just, I mean, not that this is the first time that this has been happening, right? But there's just this, we say that there are rules, and then if you break them, it's like, well, we're not really going to enforce them. It's like, the laws don't even exist then, Yeah.
Exactly. But they still have this monopoly on violence, and they're still theoretically in control. It's just creating a system where people are dependent and have to conform or get ostracized by the powers that be, sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of some conspiracies here and there, but at the end of the day, the result is just very much that societies that are going away from this individual primacy are running into many of these issues, and they're running into issues of well, basically chasing the fiat gain of getting more people into your country to increase GDP, to keep number go up, as in that GDP number or the number on your stock exchange or the number in your real estate portfolio, right? Those, yeah, it is just paper, and it's just chasing a bad reality, and well, recognizing these things. And to put it back to Bitcoin there, so Bitcoin put the hands in node runners originally, like the people who are running the network are enforcing the rules, and everyone operates as an individual, makes their own choices. You can join the network or not, you can choose one set of rules or not. And that really puts the primacy back towards the individual. And I mean, one thing that I say, not to start the plugging or anything, but the one thing I say in my book, like pretty consistently, is there's always something one person can do. Like you can always do something to strengthen your security, to strengthen the network's security. It's Of course, this is a massive network, and the actions of one individual might not be felt, but the thing is, if no one is doing these things to make us all more secure, then the whole network will suffer in the long-term trend, right? So you can do your part to keep things robust and working. And so that's the point, is that the individual has to take the responsibility here, and that's the big shift, where you're not dependent on some bank or payment process or a government or whatever. there's no backstop. You lose your Bitcoin, that's it. But at the same time, yeah, you there's a lot you can do with those 12 magic words, and there's a lot of sovereignty to be taken for those who will.
I want to get into your book right after this, but what do you think of the 12 verse 24 words? Like, do you think there's any significant difference really between the security of using 12 or 24 words? I've always thought 24, and then someone was telling me recently, like, it's kind of waste your time.
Yes and no. Technically, 24 gives you more entropy. This is what the 12 words are doing. Is it's increasing the amount of randomness that goes into creating your private key, or more specifically, the master generator for all your private keys is really what's happening these days. You can use the 12 words for kind of anything, but it's creating the seed that creates all this other cryptography. So you do 24 words, you're just flipping that coin twice as many times, basically. Like if you think of the way you find your private keys, you just flip a coin X number of times, and it's 128 for 12, and it's 256 for 24. And sorry if I got that slightly wrong. But anyway, it's double.
I think that's
24.
right. Yeah.
And it sounds like a lot, right? But the thing is that 128 is already astronomically random. If you're actually being random, you have to be actually random, and that's a cryptographic challenge that we've mostly solved. But you do have to be.
Would it take like twice as powerful of a quantum computer to break that? Is that the idea? That's where like
effectively it is that 24 words should, to an extent, be a little harder to crack.
But we're talking like this orders of magnitudes, like so far out the size of the numbers, that it's like seems negligible.
Yeah, because
on some accounts.
The thing about it is that entropy is just the thing that's seeding the cryptography. The algorithm isn't different, right? So the point is, you're still sticking a needle into the same haystack. It's just more about like it's maybe the size of the needle. That's kind of a bad analogy, but it's effectively that if you use the 24 versus the 12, yes, you are being more random in what you're generating, but that it passed the point of significance a long time ago. It's actually true that you can have less than 12 words and have that be relatively secure. I should couch this properly, but you can write down, I think you can even do 8 of your words and like put them in your pocket or whatever, and go on a flight, or even email that to yourself, something like this. And remember 4. And the time it would take for someone to crack the 4 is still like astronomically hard if they were just trying every combination, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still possible, but it's like you have to get yourself over the threshold of basically a standard computer being able to brute compute if they've already got the first 8. Or I think once you get to only 3 missing, I think that's the threshold for where it's not so hard to figure out the rest. Yeah.
Let's transition then to your book. I wonder, 2 questions at the same time. Why'd you write it, if you were to give like what the purpose is for it? And then 2 is, what are the top like 2 or 3 things that your average pleb would take away from your book, the most valuable things that they could take away from your book when they read it?
Great questions. Well, so the first one, semi-meta answers. I wrote this book because I had it in me, but it was more like I realized I always knew, okay, but maybe I could do something cybersecurity related here, like this is what I do for my day job and everything, but I've never really been the kind of person out there putting out, say, okay, here's how to secure your hardware wallet or whatever it is. There's lots of people doing great work on that, and it's valuable. It's great stuff. But then what I realized was it was this critical infrastructure angle that I didn't see anyone talking about, and I really got a little bit inspired by some of the topics around spam, arbitrary data, things like this, and I saw some parallels to how we would treat something like that in the critical infrastructure world. And I got to thinking, hey, maybe I can put together a book it's not comprehensive. I don't want to use that word, but that really goes through the threat landscape of Bitcoin. And I came up with about 10 categories of things. So there's 10 chapters. There's more stuff going on there in Bitcoin, but keep it simple and contained enough. And mapped out what are these threats to Bitcoin, whether that's your personal Bitcoin or to the network. And I also grouped that into 3 categories. So kind of your own individual Bitcoin, then more like structural threats to Bitcoin, the network. And then finally things that are kind of coming at it from external, like political threats, regulatory threats. What happens if the electrical grid goes down, quantum, AI, all that sort of thing. So I went through that whole threat landscape and modeled that out. Threat modeling is the term in the industry for that.
What percentage probability, having run that analysis, what percentage probability would you put on Bitcoin surviving the next 100 years and like retaining its important fundamental properties?
Wow, that's first of all, I'll say that there's a difference between quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis. So everything in defending Bitcoin is broken down in terms of risk, which is the measurement of the likelihood of something bad happening times the impact of something bad happening. And the thing is, I'm doing it subjectively the entire time. I'm clear that my ratings for some level of risk, likelihood, impact is subjective. It's my opinion. It's an educated opinion to some extent, but I'm not an expert on every in and out in the Bitcoin space. And so I just want to couch that a little bit. It's my best understanding.
Yeah. And anyone who tells you they are, by the way, don't believe them, because there's 100%. Nobody that's an expert on every piece of it. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. And not even to Satoshi to a certain extent. And actually, not to sidetrack us too much, but I think there is a difference between people who know how Bitcoin works and understanding how it behaves out in the world. That could be important in other parts of the discussion.
Because it is a network. It's a network of humans, right? So there's the technical, this is what the code says, this is what it does. Yeah, this is how it works on that end. And then there's the element of it survives and grows because of humans coming on and off the network.
Absolutely. So, and I think that there is a difference in perspective there. I have massive respect for developers who know what they're doing with Bitcoin and know how the code works. But I definitely think there's a disconnect between plebs and devs in terms of the way they're thinking about this stuff. But anyway, so quantifying it is really impossible. The thing is, I think as long as we're trending towards more decentralization, if I'm going to break it down a little bit, that in Bitcoin terms, decentralization equals security. The mining threat, for example, the biggest issue with mining is just that is getting more and more centralized all the time into a few different pools, right? Foundry controls over 30% of the network on their own. You can take the next 2 others and you've got 50-60% of the network, right? So if they were to work together, they could choose to censor blocks, they could choose to reorg any chain so that only the 3 of them get to find any blocks. Like there's some serious stuff that can happen if one entity is controlling 51% of the hash, and like we really need to make sure that doesn't happen. And so efforts to decentralize mining are just fantastic. And I mean, you can have opinions about people who work at Ocean, but Ocean is seriously doing some fantastic things. There's some criticisms of Ocean that they're not perfectly open source or whatever it is, but I mean they found over 1,000 blocks from a miner making their own template, and that's just really improving the decentralization of the network. And so I kind of look at all this stuff through, are we trending in the right direction, and are we taking the right steps to keep Bitcoin working? Because that's really what cybersecurity is all about, is keeping the system running. Critical infrastructure cybersecurity is all about keeping the system running. There's a term in the industry, the CIA triad, no relation to the 3-letter agency, but it stands for confidentiality, integrity, availability. Confidentiality is keeping secrets safe, things like passwords, things like your social security number, things like the credentials for your bank account, something like this. Integrity is preventing tampering. So if someone goes into your bank account and steals everything, they've tampered with it. If someone takes your Telegram account and locks you out and starts trying to scam people and infect you with viruses, that's an integrity breach. But availability is all about the system, keeping the system running, keeping one more block every 10 minutes, TikTok next block, keeping that thing running. That's the entire point. And so I guess to actually answer your the first part of the question, or the second part of the first question, is that the takeaway that I want the readers to understand is that the network depends on individuals in every aspect, and that there's always something you can do to play a part in it, right? And it goes beyond your individual Bitcoin. Securing your individual Bitcoin is really important, and I lead with that. But understanding and knowing about the other things going on and getting involved and putting your weight behind things that decentralize the network and things that keep it focused on the monetary properties, that's the goal. And maybe in terms of the next 100 years question, well, I think the only way Bitcoin actually dies is if people stop caring about the core purpose of Bitcoin, the thing that it's here to do. If Bitcoin loses its identity, I think Bitcoin loses the value proposition. To be honest, I think number go up stops if Bitcoin loses its identity as a monetary system, as money. The more it's co-opted and centralized, the greater the risk is. I'll just put it in terms of risk. The greater the risk is that this project fails and something catastrophic happens, that either people stop caring or something actually takes Bitcoin, the system, down, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. And well, some people, and I'm fairly persuaded by this argument, think that it's not really possible to do Bitcoin again now that there's knowledge of how that whole thing would play out. There's always going to be some
shot at this like natural emergence where nobody, where no one knows who created it still, which is just staggering that that's the case, right?
Yep,
and
absolutely.
Yeah.
So protecting, that's a big deal, and I think the primary takeaway I want is one of empowerment. There's always something you can do, but stay vigilant, stay aware. Don't just think that Bitcoin is anti-fragile because some people on X say it is. Right.
Yeah. So then I wonder if you could explain to me now, as if I was brand new to this conversation, let's say, how Bitcoin's governance model works. What do the nodes do? What do the miners do? And most importantly, related to this, I suppose, like what check and balances do nodes have on miners? Do users have on miners? I guess the four groups that come to mind immediately are nodes, miners, devs, and users, perhaps. Maybe you'd have another way of breaking it down. But yeah, how does this governance mechanism work, and who's in charge?
No, you took this right out of probably chapter 12. I'm guessing is where I put that exact model in there. So
Sweet.
yeah,
Is that you use those 4? Did I hit it?
I use those 4. I use those 4.
Okay, nice. I
Yeah,
just started the book. I haven't finished it, but
No,
nice.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
the spicy chapters are 11 and 12. So I hope you enjoy those.
Okay, sweet.
The governance model, yeah. So nodes, miners, developers, and users. There have been other models for this that, for example, put exchanges as their own category, and but yeah, I break it down here because I think every participant in the network is one of those things at least, right? Hopefully everyone is a user, a hodler, hopefully, but that's not always fully guaranteed, right? Because you have miners that just sell all their Bitcoin, right? They're participating in just the mining service. I think most node runners are hodlers. I don't know why you wouldn't be otherwise, but oh yeah, merchants and exchanges is kind of the other kind of categories that come out here, but and a merchant can be in the same stage, like they accept Bitcoin because some of their customers want them to accept Bitcoin, but they never do anything with it, right? So there's degrees of, are you a Bitcoiner or not, something like this. But okay, governance structure. The nodes enforce the rules. So this being really basic is that the nodes agree on a set of consensus rules, and they say that the next block that comes in is compliant with those rules or not. That's really simply what nodes do. And there are a lot of other things to it, like every transaction in a block must be consensus valid in order for that block to be valid. So nodes do a lot of filter, semi-ironically, but in order for a transaction to propagate through the network, it must be consensus valid, something like this. Consensus and policy are 2 funny words here that are relatively relevant, but they're both overloaded, which is bad. Multiple uses. I'll try to keep the term consensus as referring to those rules that make a transaction or a block valid on Bitcoin, what all nodes agree to. And policy are certain settings that you can change on a node, for example, for what transactions you choose to relay on the network. Miners are specifically attempting to find a hash below the current difficulty target of a candidate block. So they have a block template, a block of valid transactions, or else the work that they're doing would be meaningless. And they're hashing against that through various means and trying to find a valid hash. And the sum total of the work that the miners are doing is the security of the network. It's what prevents double spending. It's what prevents everyone from building a block and kind of claiming reward. It's the mechanism that keeps everyone honest, something like that, in a chain. So the miner is looking for that next block, and the nodes validate it. Now, if we're talking about a change to the rules, both sides have to be on board. And and I'm not glossing over the other 2 groups yet. It's just that there's this interplay here that nodes can change the rules that are valid. But if all the miners leave and decide to stay on the old rule set, something like this, then really what you've got is that there's a competing set of chains. Some nodes will be running one set of rules, another set of nodes will be running another set of rules. Now, mining activity does not equal economic value. It does not equal which chain in a split is the so-called right one or the canonical one, the one that is Bitcoin. But miners won't, if they're rational actors to any degree, they won't stay on the chain that gives them less value. So there's a correlation there. Developers are the people who can build changes to the system. And that's, I think, the key difference here. So if you think about it kind of like two sides, and you kind of have miners on one side, nodes on the other. So the devs are kind of somewhere here at the top, and the users are somewhere here in the bottom, and the kind of my little square of conceptualizing. And the devs are able to they make changes. They propose changes.
Propose the changes that the miners and nodes would decide whether or not to accept.
Right. And specifically what they're doing is they're changing node software. That's very specifically the only thing that matters here is the node software. There are other developments that can, say, create things that use Bitcoin in interesting ways that some people might object to. But the cool thing about a permissionless system is that you can just do what you want on the Bitcoin network, even if people don't like it. And I say cool semi-ironically. It's a constraint that is a emergent property from Bitcoin's lack of a central controller. And I say basically that sentence verbatim somewhere in Defending Bitcoin. I forget exactly where, but I was questioned by by a reviewer of the book about that one sentence where I said something like, permissionlessness is the side effect of Bitcoin not having a central controller. But that's an important subtle point. The permissionlessness of Bitcoin, the censorship resistance of Bitcoin, it's important that it's emergent, right? The system was built to create this form of electronic cash. And the only way it could do that without having a central controller was building it in a way where you don't have to ask permission for a third party, right? Where censorship is impossible because you just have miners building transactions into blocks, things like this. So it's subtle, but the reason I consider that important is that it's kind of this thing that emerged out of the design as a consequence, a necessary consequence. I'm not saying it's good or bad. Like I'm not saying that permissionlessness is bad, but I'm saying that the property of permissionlessness is an effect of everything else of how the network was built. This decentralized group of nodes and the mining and all this. One of the side effects is that you can just do what you choose within the rules. The other effect to that, though, is that any other actor on the network can choose to do things as well. Consensus valid things, such as a node runner can choose not to relay certain transactions. And I'm adamant that that's not censorship in any way. If you're making a determination not to send a transaction onward, you, the individual, the node runner, you're making an individual choice, and no one can force you to do that, right? And I think that's fantastic. And now, similarly, you can also choose to run a node, Libre Relay as an example, that just says anything goes, and even they have limits. Actually, they don't relay transactions that are below the dust limit, for example. And then that's a particularly bad idea for miners and nodes to relay below the dust limit for a few reasons, but not super relevant. But yeah, the other thing is that miners can choose which transactions they include in the blocks that they are searching for, right? And if they choose to give up some fee revenue, but they don't include certain types of transactions or even certain addresses, right? Like if I'm a miner and I don't like your transactions and I know your addresses, for example, like I can. But the beauty of it is,
but they'd have to stop every miner everywhere from including, that's really decentralized, right? Like, because you
Yeah,
could rent hash and be like, say there was 99% of miners were like, we want to censor this one guy's transactions, but if you could get 1% of hash somewhere, which is like not a small thing to do, right? But a country or whoever could do that, then eventually you'd get your transactions processed in a way that the other 99% of miners wouldn't be able to stop. So that's how Bitcoin manages to provide that uncensorability.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually like, so it's more of a lens on that individual choices on consensus valid things. It's permissionlessness in multiple directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have permission to interact with the network in all of the ways that you want to. So if you choose to say that a certain type of transaction is abuse in your view, and you just simply refuse to interact with those things, and when they land on the chain in a block, nothing you can do about it, and that's fine. I don't know anyone who's anti-spam who doesn't acknowledge that reality. Like, this stuff lands on chain, okay, fine, but we can do things like put some friction up, or miners can choose not to include those transactions, or a group of nodes can choose to get together in a coordinated manner but decentralized and say, hey, we're going to run a different version of the code, still fully valid, fully compliant with consensus up to X point, but we're going to start enforcing different rules soon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing is, the funny thing with Bitcoin 10 is that it's just this permissionlessness playing out in a different direction than a lot of the people who say permissionlessness is so important might
permissionlessness
want.
but not like that.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, like, the dynamic, developers propose changes, right? But it is up to node runners and miners to accept those changes or not. And the way users, that fourth group, kind of comes into play here. And this is maybe going to be controversial to some, but it's you vote with your wallet, right? Like, I do think it's true that choosing to buy Bitcoin or not is a signal, in the confidence of the network, and choosing to buy node hardware and signal one way or another, that's also a signal. Choosing to get into mining, that's a signal. Choosing to do development or fund people who do development, it's all a signal. And economic weight is a term that's a little not super popular in, say, Pro 110 circles, but I can't get around that if you are representing a lot of traffic on the network, if you are representing a lot of wealth stored in Bitcoin, that you probably have more effect on the network than, first of all, you definitely have more effect on the network than a node that just spins up and watches what's going on. If that node isn't doing anything, running a transaction through it, or it's even if it's just the thing you connect your wallet to, and then you got your cold storage and you put some more in cold storage. I mean, that clears the bar of being an economic actor in Bitcoin. But yeah, there is something to that a large merchant or a large exchange or something like this likely has more of an impact on the network in terms of what software they choose to run, what mining they choose to run. And
yeah, well, and they just have they sort of are a representation of all of the, not all of it, but like a lot of the users on the network. It kind of goes through this like funnel point, and they're represented there. And I noticed the BIP110 guys don't, like you were saying, they don't like the putting weight on that. But it's like, okay, so I view it more as like levels of, okay, you have the devs propose the code, and then you have like the war that takes place on the nodes to be like, okay, who's going to run what, who's going to accept what. We see our node signaling, but it's imperfect. There's a rough consensus that forms there because there's different ways that can look like one thing is happening or another thing is happening, right? And then ultimately you have that fight there, and then there's the final, like, okay, where does everybody go, right? When you have the Bcash Bitcoin split, it's like, okay, we have that debate, everyone decides what sort of software they're going to run, it happens, and then it's boom, where does consensus form? And consensus forms, yeah, at the economic level, right? What makes Bitcoin valuable is all of the people who have decided to store their value on the network. And so that ultimately is like, that's where the consensus is where does everybody move? And that's not Bitcoin specific. It's the same thing for the United States dollar network. It's the same thing for the the euro network. These are all just monetary networks that have their users on them, and they're valuable because all of their users decide to place their value there. So I think that there's like this sequence of events, and we'll see. If we have a chain split with, I don't know. I don't want to go all the way there yet. So keep going with what you're saying.
No, well, yeah, this concept of sort of economic weight, economic actors, this is another thing that comes down to individual choices, right? Like if you, the individual, choose to go through a centralized third party, you are giving more power to that third party on the network. You're giving up your sovereignty. You're giving up your voice, your vote. I don't believe in one node, one vote, but
Mm-hmm.
some amount of nodes is putting some degree of threat into the network. That's what BIP 110 is. And I understand concerns about that. Is this the right way to do a change on Bitcoin? I'm fully sympathetic to that particular viewpoint, especially it convinced me for a while that pretty much, okay, no matter how worthwhile 110 is,
even if all of the 7 things were net positive, like by the means at which it's installed, like could you take issue with that? Yeah. So why did you take issue, and then why did you change?
Sure. So combo factors, the governance issue, largely, it's not that I didn't put full weight to full seriousness on that, but definitely I've always thought something like, if it's possible to cause a change on Bitcoin, then that's following the rules for sure. And maybe that's kind of an underlying point here, is that no one's doing anything wrong. They're just they're running different code, right? Like, yeah, it's entirely possible that BIP 110 ends up failing, ends up splitting off, whatever it is. But it's also entirely possible that they'll convince miners to signal, and off it goes. This is what the user activated software concept is. It's that users are going to change their rules and tell miners you can either follow or not. And so what was convincing me a little bit was that, okay, I'm writing this book about risk management, effectively, on Bitcoin. And first of all, there was this massive governance issue, right? This huge issue with the development of Bitcoin Core. I highly recommend the article series by Hodlonaut on this. He's got some detractors, some criticism for this series, that it's biased, one-sided, whatever. I really think he's just putting out statements of fact that are easily corroborated, and so there is a pattern of that Bitcoin Core development is effectively a walled garden, and it's pushing Bitcoin in certain directions that plebs might not agree with, right? But the corollary, and what I ended that same chapter with about this kind of governance issues, is that what happens when you stop agreeing, right? These chain split scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is
how that
for
works.
People that are new to this, it's like, some of our audience is newer to this conversation. I think it's important to understand that, like, we've had fork wars before. We're having a fork war now. We will have more fork wars in the future. This was like, and they will probably be more contentious than this one in the future, I bet, And so like this is part of Bitcoin's decentralized self-correcting mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah, well, also the meta thing here is that because I didn't want Defending Bitcoin, this book, to be about the current moment. I do cover BIP110 specifically, but it was impossible not to. A chain split, right, is just the mechanism for disagreement. And if you can't take what another group is saying for their rule set, that's your option. Change the rules, follow a different set of rules, whatever it is. It's really part of the design, if not necessarily intentional, but it's an effect of what blockchain actually is. And so if a group is just simply changing the code they're running, and if it gets to the threshold of that it's going to convince the miners to signal and become compliant with the new rules, implement the new rules, that was entirely within the frames and bounds of the rules of Bitcoin. So I see nothing wrong with that. Now, okay, do I see some issues with that? Yeah, okay, like any minority could come in and sort of push this through. Yeah. There's some concern there. I don't want to hand wave that away, but there is a resistance mechanism that has not been invoked against BIP110, and that would be specifically rejecting blocks that comply with 110 through the signaling mechanism.
Why do you think that hasn't appeared, the user rejected soft fork?
If I'm being as generous in steel manning their position as much as I can, I think they just don't take 110 seriously. That's my position on that. Because I think if they did and they care enough, as some rhetoric online seems to be saying, they would just run it. There was a post by Stefan Livera, incidentally. So I give him credit for this, that some interactions with Stefan were what sparked my understanding that I'm thinking about this through this critical infrastructure lens, through this lens of availability. I consider the arbitrary data stuff to be basically an availability attack on Bitcoin, on monetary use of the network. And so interactions with him is what sparked it. And so I give him credit in the acknowledgements. But he had a post a couple of days ago. I hadn't responded to it there, but why not to run a URSF, or why URSF, user rejected soft fork, isn't required. And the list goes something like, we've never had to do it before to defeat other forks. It would require a lot of coordination to do it. And yeah, it would. If there's a coordinated group that's trying to change Bitcoin, you kind of need a coordinated group to defend that. If you're on the side of,
I don't like how that feels, kind of, like it's a low resolution take, but I don't like the idea of, like, and maybe it's just reality, right? Maybe it's just, who cares? It's just the reality of the situation. But it seems to me like I don't know. I don't like the idea of having to constantly defend against convinced minority positions, I suppose.
Well, here's 2 points here, right? One is that we don't know if BIP110 has achieved the threshold. And maybe to try to actually answer one of your previous questions of kind of what got me back, because I think this is important. I write about this chain split stuff, and I'm writing a risk management book. I can't advocate for the scenario that's going to cause more uncertainty, chaos, right? That's the riskier scenario. Avoiding a chain split is the thing that reduces risk the most on the network. But what changed my mind was that after a certain point, this thing is going, whether we like it or not, right? And I support vast majority of BIP110. I certainly support its goals. I think the implementation isn't perfect. I think the activation method isn't perfect. I have been clear about those things online. I don't think litigating that is the point here.
I think I sit right about there with you as well. Yeah, like
sure.
What it aims at seems totally right to me, but I just wonder if it will be net positive or negative as a result of those other pieces.
I'm convinced it's net positive, but I think it could have broken a couple of fewer eggs to do so, something like that, or it could have made some compromises to make it a little more socially uh, uh, acceptable. And this is actually a really interesting thing, getting back to a little bit earlier in the conversation about speaking your truth and speaking with integrity, and just drawing a line. Yeah, there's really something to that. There's also something to pragmatism, though, and achieving what you can, not taking a stand for the perfect that ends in you dying. Basically, there's really some even philosophical wrestling going on there. I consider myself a pretty pragmatic person, and that the outcome is important, and getting to net positive is better than getting to perfect, something like that. So I'm quite convinced that BIP 110 is net positive. I do think so. But it could have been more compromising to achieve social consensus more easily, such as by having the op return limit be slightly higher, not the 83 bytes, but 256 or something like this. But anyway, some people probably aren't going to like that, but it's fine. The whole thing there is that this is happening, right? And what's the scenario that's going to have the most uncertainty and risk now that BIP 110 is definitely going to activate, and there's definitely a significant portion of the network that is going to enforce it? And to anyone who says that this is just a Sybil attack, I've been out to conferences, I've been speaking to people online in real life who believe in this thing 100%. You should see the YouTube comments for Knut Svanholm's podcast, my mentions on X, whatever. Like, okay, if this is all just some Truman Show, like winding us all up here, if this is just a Sybil attack, it's a damn good one, because honestly, like, real people care about this stuff. Real people are choosing to do this. It's not a Sybil attack.
Definitely. Yeah, and I've seen a lot of those, real people that I know, and, real people that I know through the internet, and it's not a Sybil attack. But I would guess that it's probably about the amount of nodes that are running it in proportion to people paying attention, maybe slightly higher, right? Let's say that, 18, 20% of nodes are running knots. Most of those are signaling for BIP 110. I was running knots, and I was running knots signaling for BIP 110, or however you phrase it correctly. And I started digging in. I was like, I think I want to keep running knots, but maybe take off my signal for BIP 110. Like, and I know that is optionality they include on that side, which I think is good.
Not anymore though. You have to downgrade.
You'd have to go back. Okay.
Yeah. But
yeah.
No, it's funny. It is what it is. I mean, I do agree with you about the proportionality. And I mean, this is another funny aspect to this, that coming back to the URSF. But okay, I'll try and answer. We're in like nests of questions at this point. So what's the least risky scenario if it's happening? And I reasoned through that a little bit, and we're not going to convince people to not go through it with it. It's just not going to happen. And so the smooth activation of 110, just the thing goes smoothly. Miners choose to signal, they choose to comply. It all happens in a quick instant, and there's no chain split issues. There's no long period of time where you don't know which chain your transaction is going to land in or not. That's the least risky, least chaotic scenario in my view. And all of the bad scenarios where you have lots of risk, you have risk of losing money, you have risk of there being a hard fork off, and a certain proportion of the network chooses to not be here, which means that a certain proportion of the people who were
that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want
Especially
that
the
at
people that we lose, it's like even if they're wrong, let's say, if that's, that's not the right frame, but let's say even they're wrong, and even if BIP 110 is a net negative, the fact that we would lose these like really principled monetary maximalists. These, the I think it's the right type of people we want on the Bitcoin network. If we were to lose that crew, I'd be sad. I don't want to see a chain split where, we lose some of that group, which I find unlikely. I find that very unlikely, but.
Well, I don't know. I think some people are ready to fork off, absolutely, and I mean, I had a back and forth with Luke Dasher before I kind of like really flipped here, but I mean, I was questioning this stuff right up until that last second, and like, what is the implication for Bitcoin if we're really putting the decision into the hands of just these few groups of miners, basically, but. I came around to that the game theory, and I mean that's a loaded and sort of annoying word, but the game theory of it here is that, or the risk management, if I can frame it a little better, you have on one side a scenario where if you don't signal, you have a chance, however small, of losing the blocks that you find, losing the Bitcoin that you've found. And on the other, you eliminate that risk, basically to the extent that it's possible to eliminate a risk. You eliminate that risk. You just signal, and by making that choice, okay, maybe the result is slightly lower fees. Maybe it's actually entirely possible that fees would go up if arbitrary data stays at the same level, and that's a funny other aspect to this conversation. Because it's slightly more expensive because they have to chunk it up differently. No one says that BIP 110 is about stopping arbitrary data. It's about adding friction and about adding sensible limits, making it harder.
There's the social element where it signals this stuff is not welcome here, and then there's the technical element where it makes it just a tiny bit, but a little bit more expensive to get.
Yeah.
To get some of that
I think the meta thing that gets glossed over here is that I think the limits are actually legitimately good. That development in the direction of let's make Bitcoin more easy to script and more easy to do cool and interesting things with exciting smart contracts, things like this. That's a paraphrase of something Merch said recently at a I think a Bitcoin plus or something like this. That's the type of thing that opens us up to attack surface in the future. The unintended consequences. Like we didn't really get into what set this all off, but basically a couple of design decisions in Taproot allowed this whole arbitrary data thing, and again, jumping
which was
around here a little.
Similar in its installation, right? In terms of there was a minority of nodes who thought this was a good idea. This is where I wonder, like, right? Was it because it didn't really have consensus when it? Oh, okay,
no.
Okay.
Taproot is the one that had overwhelming consensus, overwhelming, and there was sort of a little bit of like kind of the goodwill that Core had built up over the Fork Wars, SegWit, all this, standing in a principled way against the Bcachers, and some of that goodwill went into that Taproot got activated fairly quickly, and a lot of people didn't see the issues that could arise, and that's entirely
increased
the problem,
functionality,
right?
and increased threat vectors for unintended consequences.
Yeah, well, over 99% of Taproot is spam and dust at the moment, and again, being outcomes based, like it was Taproot a net positive? I do not believe so at the moment. Right. The thing, one of the things with BIP 110, okay, and I keep sort of not answering this question. Like, so it's the least risky option, but it's also that BIP 110 shows that we node runners, plebs, users would be able to roll back a change to Bitcoin if there was some negative, some unintended consequence. And Saylor was talking about this ages ago, that changing Bitcoin is actually hard because you're always basically guaranteed to make one party not happy, or that one party can be not happy, and that's just not an ideal situation. Like a bunch of miners weren't happy back in 2017, and I mean they ended up basically coming around. The lessons of 2017 are kind of funny here and really play a big part in what's going to go down here as well. Like Was the lesson of 2017 that the nodes are in charge and the nodes can just do stuff? Nodes can impose rules. I don't know, right? What I said at the beginning there when you asked about the kind of the power structures, nodes enforce rules. That I believe is proven, right? Miners tried to change something. Miners tried to change the rules, and nodes didn't let them do that. If BIP 110 fails, I'm stealing this side here. What that will tell us is that nodes cannot create new rules and just force that through without the social layer of building consensus.
Is that, yeah, right. Because I wonder if that is what it tells us. Because maybe you can make the case that nodes could change rules. They just didn't get enough social consensus, total consensus to do it in this case.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. But I think the thing is that if everyone agrees and it goes smooth, then you had consensus, right? If it's not controversial, you didn't.
Well, there's the consensus. Yeah, when it's
something like that,
when it becomes the longest chain. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then so that's the thing here. We're finding out we're finding out if BIP 110 has made enough of a threat here, and again, it's tough. So coming out and supporting this directly was not an easy decision. Even though I support its goals, I think I was saying that I get the point of that. If you see that needing to defend yourself against a minority that is organized and wants to make a change that you don't agree with, having to defend against that, yeah, I can see how that could feel not great, how that could feel like an attack. At the same time, it's users playing within the rules of the network and making choices. And you have a choice too. You have a choice to oppose that. And if you really oppose that enough, you go to the effort to make to build the coordination to say, hey, we have to stop this. And I think a rejection of the soft fork with just a basic level of adoption would be enough for miners to just say we're going to split either way, because that's what a rejected soft fork does, is it guarantees the split. It says that one side is just simply not going to accept the new rules, and so you go that way, we go this way. And the status quo is just so much easier to maintain, right? A change has to get over this inertia, right? That everything is just working fine. So I think no matter what, we're going to find out something about the network and how it operates, how it works. One nuance that kind of contributes to pushing me over the edge to actual support here is that proving that we can roll back a negative change is hugely important. One of the objections to BIP 110 is that it would set a precedent for essentially unpredictability. That if you have a set of transactions that are valid and the network can suddenly say that this set is no longer valid in the future, that it could undermine even the monetary proposition of Bitcoin, that certain use cases might not always be valid, or certain implementations of transactions might not always be valid. But my pushback to that is that there's no right to a certain functionality of Bitcoin to always be working in the future. It simply has to remain in consensus, right? But the network has every right to change what is in consensus or not. And if there's a functionality of Bitcoin that is seen to be a net negative, the network taking that away has got to be within scope. Because
yeah, that makes sense.
You think about what is a net negative? What is the worst case scenario, right? If you keep on adding net negatives, right? If you keep upgrading, adding new features, and they turn out to have unforeseen consequences, right? You keep doing that. Directionally, this is what you talked about for 100 years, right? That's what could break Bitcoin down, is changes that slowly add new features, slowly add new things but slowly add new ways for garbage onto the chain, or more charitably, like competition for the base layer from things that aren't increasing the benefits for the individual, for sovereignty, things like this. That's the scenario that could happen. And so if the network isn't able to principally say we are going to draw a line here and a bad change needs to get rolled back, honestly, that's what could kill Bitcoin. And it would be the biggest case for ossification, to use the term that I've ever heard. Like, if BIP 110 fails, in my eyes,
we should basically just like never change anything.
Another upgrade to Bitcoin is virtually impossible, at least under current conditions, because no group is going to get the level of consensus, even just on principle, right?
Yeah.
So it's really tough to see. I have gotten myself to the position that BIP 110 is in fact the most positive thing for Bitcoin, considering the current situation. I know others disagree with me and disagree for various reasons. The governance issue is, in my opinion, the best one, the strongest one. Like it can be a negative for a minority to be able to have that control. But if it's easily counterable, well, you gotta have to do the work. And the thing is, BIP 110 wouldn't, if it didn't have enough people to actually be like credible, you can just ignore it. Like, you don't need to URSF from every kook who says, "Hey, I'm changing the rules of Bitcoin tomorrow." Yeah, that guy's one node, right? Like, that's not compelling anything. Right, that's not going to get any mileage to change. No.
Yeah.
Right. But if you get a large portion of the network large enough to say, "Hey, you might want to think about signaling and complying with this," then that's a threshold, right? And that's a threshold that tells you something about where you would need to run some kind of resistance if you want to do that.
Yeah.
So
to wrap up this bit of conversation here, so this is going to drop. This episode is going to drop on Friday, which is August 7th. And so activation day is August 7th or 8th, right?
Yep.
So
getting there.
What do you think your average, maybe 8th or 9th, something like that. But what should your average person know about this going into this period of time? Let's say, I think there's probably going to be, maybe it's going to be figured out in a few hours. Maybe it's going to be a day or two where we're kind of taking in the information, seeing how the network is reacting, seeing how miners, everybody is reacting. Do you think like the average Joe should know going into this period of time? If there's like a PSA, I mean, to me, I think like don't transact for a second, but like, or any meaningful don't transact for, until the dust has settled. But what do you think people should know about this?
You got it. Spend the next. I mean, if this is dropping on the 7th, maybe the messages don't transact, but make any transactions you need to make before that. I do think this is going to be solved fairly quickly. I think it'll be solved in about an hour. We'll know in about an hour. BIP 110 is never catching up if it doesn't get signaling immediately. I'm full realist here. There's
do you think
no
Core
scenario.
might adopt pieces of this proposal? Because it seems to me like there's some pieces that seem like closer to like shoe in good ideas, and some pieces that seem closer to like, is that a good idea? Does it set a bad precedent? Do you think there's a good chance that there's like a realignment after this where they go, okay, well, you guys didn't activate, but there's some good ideas here?
No. I don't believe that at all. I mean, I want to give as much credit as possible here to people doing development work, and I've had conversations. Especially, I went to a Bitcoin Plus in Vienna, where basically the entire purpose was to bring together kind of Austrian economics oriented people, and developers together to have conversations, and in that regard, that went great. But the what I got constantly from people there and at BTC Prague and online and all this was that Core made the right decision technically, and they have no reason to back down. Speaking of backs, Adam said, maybe it would have been socially more acceptable if they had gone with an op return limit of something like 256 bytes, and that would have broadly solved the problem. They just didn't want to make another default change again in the future, which there is evidence of a few things being done out of convenience in Core lately. Like it's fine to just paper over something instead of doing the work to fix it, and that's another sort of through line in defending Bitcoin is that the trade-off to security is convenience. So you do have to give up convenience every time you add a layer of security, and it kind of it correlates. You just have to do the work. It might be annoying. It might take work, but you get to a better spot generally than doing the convenient thing. Do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. I think it's in either the 12 rules for life or the one after that. Anyway, I don't think there's any chance they adopt anything from BIP 110, mostly because everything BIP 110 does puts constraints on development. It puts a tighter box around which developers have to work in, and I see the value in that, but a lot of people in the development space do not. And I also want to couch this with things like Lightning is completely unaffected. That's really, really quite clear that Lightning is completely unaffected. And Arc looks to be completely unaffected. Like this big layer 2 that's gaining quite a bit of traction. Liquid is completely unaffected. All of these established monetary focused layer 2s are fine. There's
right, because and what the Core people are saying, just to fill people in maybe, is they're saying we need this space data-wise to be able to build important functionality like layer 2s and whatever. And you're saying that this sets restrictions on the data that can be added, but not in a way that infringes on people's capacity to build layer 2s and monetary uses. On top of that, is that correct?
Right. Well, what I even go as far as to say is that the answer that I've gotten back from more than one person is that we don't know what we're going to need. And that was entirely the point of putting in these, removing limits, putting in places to store data that don't have limits. This Taproot annex, so-called, is one of these things that's unlimited. You can just put as much data in there as you want, intentionally, and
up until the like 4 megabyte block limit. So
yep,
okay,
that's it.
Gotcha.
That's it. Yep. And so the whole thing with it is that we don't know when we're going to need to use these things. We don't know when we're going to have some need for this use case. And the thing about that is that we're just so not there, like.
Well, and maybe the point is like, how about we just don't have any more use cases? How about it's just, this is the use case. Here it is. It's let it ossify.
I sort of, so I'll push back a little on that. Like I get the idea that we do need to have scaling. Like the development community really does seem to, they're focusing on effectively two things. And it might sound like they're more aligned to what I am aligned with than otherwise. They're really concerned about mining centralization. But their solutions to this, the technical solutions that they have to these problems, which are the things that are under their control, are these levers of relay policy, making sure that all miners get all consensus valid transactions. Like this is basically the core, the crux of the core of the issue, is that basically the whole idea of relay policy was going to become irrelevant. They were just going to say that a good node on the network, an ideal node on the network, just relays everything, because then it reaches every miner as quickly as possible, and that's the most fair thing that prevents an unfair advantage for the largest miners. Okay, I get it. That's really noble and valuable, that's a valid framing of this issue, but it just ignores the incentive implications of what it means for Bitcoin to not have any policy limits anymore, any kind of idea of standardness. Standardness really applies to policy, not consensus, because consensus is the ultimate backstop. So what BIP 110 is saying, okay, we acknowledge that this is the reality now, that policy has changed, it's become irrelevant or somewhat irrelevant. There is evidence that a certain amount of filter in the space creates enough friction for blocks with more arbitrary data than not, but it's really, really, really minor, like extremely low currently. But the point is that okay, we're going to make the change on the consensus layer then, and put in this change so that the standardness rules that used to be the case, those become the consensus rules, and those become the rules that all miners get access to.
Standardness rules that used to be the case before the policy change in 30. That's what you mean?
Yeah, the opportune limit specifically. Yeah.
Is there a danger to fighting? Because what feels to me like the biggest danger, I don't know. One of the dangers is the like fighting a policy change with a consensus change retaliation. Like, and then I realized, like, okay, well, if you fight, yeah, what do you think of that? Because then if you fought the policy change with more policy change at the relay level, like if you have 50% of transactions relaying and 50% not, and then it's like they might as well all be relaying, right?
I want to be kind here. I really think that's just a misunderstanding of how the network works. Like to anyone who's kind of saying that as an objection, policy in a flood fill network, I sound like Adam right now a little bit. It can be dictated by a really small minority of people, of actors on the network choosing to have more permissive policy. Yes. All you have to do is get a group of these more permissive people, connect to the miners, and they're just going to route around the entire rest of the network. It's completely true, right? So you can't change a policy decision with another policy decision, right? Because as long as you have this group of the network choosing to run a more permissive policy, as soon as you have that, that's in effect the status quo of the network. That's why I say that the opportune change was
almost like a consensus change.
Yes and no. It's
like
more
in effect, it's not a consensus change, but it almost like affects the network as if it were.
Yes, the most permissive policy set of rules, standard policy set of rules that's adopted by a certain threshold of the network, it's maybe 10% of the network is needed for this to be efficient. As long as that percentage of the network is following this set of rules, there you go. You have your new network reality. Now, the argument is that against that is that miners were opening direct channels to accept transactions, and that this called private mempools, and that the developers I've talked to say that this is such a bad thing. This is such a bad thing, and we need to disincentivize that. And I just say, like, okay, but again, permissionlessness, right? You can never stop them from doing that, right? And if you have some kind of thing where you, the miner, are just going to offer the service of selling your block space directly to some people and bypassing this free market, that's their choice, and it's the choice of the buyers and the users, and you might have some the ways of commoditizing block space might be seriously underestimated. Like that, this is just the way that the direction is going to go. I recommend listening to some podcast appearances by Bob Burnett who's thought a lot about this, that block space is really the commodity here, and all this. So like, miners have a different conception of this thing than the devs who are theoretically making changes to make mining more fair, right? And ultimately, part of this issue is that I think the development community is really trying to over-engineer Bitcoin in a way that just doesn't play out when you're dealing with a network of people. Like you're not going to just say, well, hey, we have the technical argument and here's why, and you should agree because we're right. There's a valid disagreement here, and the one that I cite here is that a policy default is effectively a fence, which is a deterrent control in physical security terms. It's something that says it's difficult. It becomes more difficult for you to break into this system because this fence is here. Now you can hop the fence, but that takes time, that takes effort, right?
It also takes an explicit, like, there are rules here that I'm breaking. Here's the rule, or here's the boundary, and I'm crossing. Yeah.
Well, and the main thing is that it's sort of, you stop everything that isn't able to get over that fence, right? It's subtle, but it's like it does shape the way the network behaves. Like, it's a lot easier to operate within, to go through the gate, right? To go through the specific door for arbitrary data op return. Most op return was below the standardness limit, still is actually, and so it's just, it changes network behaviors, right? And so I think to pull it back in on, like, you can't fight a policy change with consensus. Well, if the policy change has effectively done a consensus change, the only layer you're left with is the consensus layer, right? If a group of people feel strongly enough about a change in the network dynamics to say that, hey, we're going to make this change on the consensus level because the policy is insufficient, it's just the natural next step. So I know, for example, Samson has made this argument, and sorry, man, I think he's not correct here. That I'm couching that with all the humility in the world that I can muster here, but I really don't think he's got it right. That it is completely reasonable to say, hey, we're going to make this change in consensus to undo what was done in policy. So.
Well, I got to tell you, Luke, I'm excited for this conversation to be over. I'm gonna be honest. I'm excited that
no, I get it. Yeah, 100%.
Not this conversation, the BIP 110 conversation to be over. Just to be clear, but maybe I'll see actually if we could drop this a day early so that people will be able to, take a peek before that. And then I'm looking forward to the after times. Really, you mentioned Samson. You said I just thought this was an interesting tidbit. You guys, you, Knut, Samson, and somebody else, I believe, have a little band you guys play together with. Tell me who plays what. Tell me about that. Yeah. Who's on what instruments?
Knut's Fonholm is guitar and he sings. Samson plays guitar. I play bass, and Martti Malmi is the drummer. And you might know him as the first developer who got in contact with Satoshi and did the very first things on Bitcoin, ran the Bitcoin Talk forum for a while. And now he's making some insane, really, really cool freedom tech stuff. He's awesome, and you wouldn't know it, but into rock and metal music and stuff. And so we mostly play Nirvana covers. We're called Nevermind, as in the MINED, play on words and all this. But yeah, it's a lot of fun getting together with them. We play at these Satoshi Nakamoto events at various conferences. I know there's been a couple in the States and El Salvador and stuff, but we mostly, since the rest of us are Europe based, we've mostly played in Prague, and Lugano has been the place where we've gotten together the most often. So, but it's fun. We're all still friends. I hope.
Yeah.
No ill will from my side. So it's all good. Yeah.
I think that's I hope that after this passes that we can figure out ways to be not everyone's not going to be happy, right? Everyone's not going to get their way. This is how it works. But if we can find ways to kumbaya, bring everybody back together. I want to hopefully be participating in some of that bridge building afterwards, and like, figuring out how, and maybe hopefully to say, okay, well, so maybe BIP 110 activates, maybe BIP 110 doesn't activate, but like if we could get some people to be like, hey, like there's a lot of people who care a lot about this, who like, maybe this didn't activate, but have proven they can throw some weight around, and like, let's see if we can, maybe ideologically move in this direction.
Yeah, I certainly hope. I don't have huge hopes, but I certainly hope that if BIP 110 fails, that yeah, it's not just a open season on that kind of the core, the development community can just do whatever they want now. And I do think that no matter what happens, there's implications for Bitcoin, for who's in charge. I don't think Bitcoin dies if BIP 110 fails. You can clip that if you want, but I don't think that's the case. I do think we need to keep going and keep on working on this project, because why I'm here and why I believe the vast majority of Bitcoiners are here is to find a form of money that can be a way out of the fiat system, create prosperity, peace throughout the world, not in a utopian way, but truly by fixing the money. I'm here for that. I don't believe moving off to a new coin that is somehow more monetarily pure, but has fractions of the value and fractions of the individuals on it. I don't believe that's correct. I don't believe that has the same shot as what we have. I'm the pragmatist. We've got to work with what we got. And we got to work with the situation we have, which is why in the next day or two after this airs, I do hope and I advocate for that, yeah, let's push this thing through. That's the least chaotic thing here. It's temporary. It will be gone in a year. We'll have a year to assess the effects, see where to go from here. I believe it's reasonable, rational, and carries the least risk.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah. And sometimes sometimes these conversations getting into the weeds on this stuff, they're important. Sometimes they're a bit tiresome, but I think it's important to come back around to remember, like you said, the pragmatic, this, taking the route that gives us the highest probability of success. And success in what? I think we need to remember that I think we're moving into an age where humanity, we will all collectively decide together, we're at a fork in the roads, and are we going to go down the centralized totalitarian surveillance state route, where these centralized entities have control over your life in ways that Orwell and Huxley and all of these people who left us these warnings in the past 100 years, in ways they could not have imagined because of AI, because of the digital implementations of technology that allow for power to scale in ways that you just couldn't have predicted in this pre-digital time? Or are we going to go down the hard-fought, like, I was going to say bloody, but hopefully not bloody, but, bloody in spirit, like this, like painful, hard fought, but very important battle to maintain decentralized control over the important things in our life, where we don't enter into this age of like this digital tyranny, but we enter, which I think could take a long time to break out of, this like a digital dark age, so to speak. Or we could, move forward and be like, wow, things are way better for everyone. Isn't this great? Like there's less of the world relies on coercion and more of the world relies on cooperation. And hey, we're all on the same team. The producers and the consumers have incentive alignment in ways that, weren't there before. And in a governance sense for our nations, in a governance sense in tons of ways, and so I think it's important to come back to be like, hey, we're in an important battle. This, there will be years where there'll be bear market years. There'll be civil war infighting years, but to zoom out and be like, hey, the greater mission here, don't lose sight of that because it's important and is worth defending, as some people find it important to write books about, So, yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Endorse everything you just said.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's a great place to wrap, man. What are some parting thoughts for people? Where can people find you? How can people support you? Plug away.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm Luke the Wolf on X. I'm the only one, easy to find. And I am on Nostr and LinkedIn. If you're there, your audience probably isn't going to be there, but anyway.
Hey, we got some LinkedIners in the chat, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And find me everywhere. Connect with me. DefendingBitcoin.com is where you can find information about the book, Defending Bitcoin. And if you want to support me, that's 100% the best way to do that is just pick up a copy. I am making a ton of the information available, though, on the website for free. And doing some experimenting as well with ways to make information more accessible and more useful, things like this. So expect exciting things coming on defendingbitcoin.com. But if you want to support me, pick up a copy. I appreciate it. And the other thing is BTC Hell, the conference that I'm one of the organizers for in Helsinki, Finland. Next edition is September 25th, 26th, and we have people from both sides of the BIP 110 debate coming, and we might be able to do a little bit of an aftermath thing. I know it's a long way for probably most of your audience in the US, but if you're Europe based or in the Nordics or whatever, at least check us out, btchell.com. I put together the schedule, and I think it's a pretty good one. So that's the other thing that's really important to me, and I mean that just kind of underlines that. Yeah. Putting back in the local community, that's what I really try to do. I'm not from Finland, but I really, really want Bitcoin to succeed where I live and in the place that I call home. So that's what I do there is that conference, and I'm proud of it and hope we can keep going. So btchell.com, BTCHEL.
Awesome. Yeah, right on. Yeah, we'll have some links down in the description if you want to find these. And thanks, man. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you taking the time, and best of luck. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thanks a lot, Jake. Yeah, this was a really great conversation. Thanks so much for having me.